Hello and welcome to Behind the Bearcat. This is the podcast where the Northwest Missouri State University Career Services Office chats with Northwest faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends to hear about their career journeys, how they got to where they are, and how they became Bearcats. I'm Career Services Assistant Director Travis Klein.
And I'm Hannah Christian, the Director of Career Services here at Northwest. And today's guest on our show, my little drum roll, is
Adam Whiteside, new professor here. Not quite DR yet, but I'm getting close.
Well, welcome.
Welcome, Adam. Great to have you.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Yeah, for sure. Excited.
All right. So tell us what department you're in and what courses you're teaching this semester.
So I'm in the communication and mass media right now, and currently just teaching the oral communication, the intro course, as well as one section of intercultural communication.
You
All
get
right,
all the
awesome.
freshmen. So
Yeah, well, actually, the intercultural, I got kind of more of a bit of a mix, some different folks and stuff like that, as far as I think I do have a few older students in that one as well, but yeah, mostly freshmen all around though, yeah.
So can you give us a little bit of background on how did you come to be a comm professor? I mean, has communication always been interesting to you? How just give us the journey from like we Adam to like how you got to this point.
Okay. Well, like I think people have always just been super interesting, right? Like I don't think typically when someone is interested in like, studying people or like research, whatever that might be, like studying people, learning more about people, that their first idea is like communication, because a lot of people don't really understand what that is, or what that, that field is. Maybe the mass media stuff a bit more, but other than that, like, you don't think like, they think like psychology, sociology, anthropology, stuff like that. It was really more so, I was actually a mass comm, when I was an undergrad. I was, when I was kind of growing up, my dad worked in sales and he was really good at selling things. And I was kind of good at that, as well, kind of just good at persuasion and that kind of stuff. Just, getting what I wanted when I was a kid. It was kind of the start, I suppose, of the impetus of it to some extent. So I thought, I don't know, maybe I can go into advertising, and that way they can add some sort of layer of creativity to it to some extent. I can make things, and that kind of stuff was interesting to me. The actual production stuff a little bit, but mostly the creative side. I thought that was interesting. So I got into that, and I was in undergrad. Not really thinking a lot. As 18-year-olds are not really going to have a clear plan. We're like, yeah, sure, that sounds like something maybe, And my brother had gone to a school nearby, so I was like from St. Louis. Nearby is a smaller school in Illinois, called SIUE, or Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. Far enough away from home, but close enough to where I could like get away from parents and stuff like that, but also still have my friends come up if I wanted to and stuff. The priorities of someone who's 18. Uh, so I mean, so yeah, I went into that, and I thought advertising would be a decent, way to go into it. And oftentimes, like, you know, coming up with minors is like, okay, what makes sense with this in some way. So like speech comm was our version of the regular comm kind of track at that university. So they suggested I should take those courses as well. And I like those courses a lot better than I liked my mass comm courses. I was more interested in the, kind of studying people than I was. I would still like all the math comm stuff. But, I was just kind of in the back of my head. I'm like, I like this stuff a lot, but I still, went through, graduated, did all the, advertising stuff, got into the job market, and that was a nightmare. Because you realize
Tell us
it's
about
just,
the nightmare. This is what we love. Tell us about the
yeah,
nightmare.
because it's just so competitive. And if anyone's in mass media, they know it's so competitive. You guys maybe have some idea of that,
Oh
running
yeah.
this in some way. I'm sure you know. Yeah, it's not easy to get work in mass media, and you have to know how to kind of do everything. You can't just be this creative person. Like you have to know how to actually make it. Just like an inventor, and people, always tell you like, I have this great idea for this invention. It's like, okay, can you make it? And it's like, well, no. And it's like, well, then that's the end of the story. Then, you have to actually do it. And I wasn't as good at that or as passionate about that necessarily as I thought I was. So like my portfolio was not that great. I had a lot of issues getting jobs. I must have applied about hundreds of different advertising jobs. And the best thing I could come up with maybe is I get calls back from sales jobs. And I went to a few interviews of that and I was like, this is awful. I hate this. And I kind of just had a existential crisis. I'm like, I don't even think I like what I went into even because was even looking into like what the actual work was going to be. Because when you're in school, it's like all fun and games. It's like, oh, you can do an advertise, campaign or do some like make a ad or write copy for like these brands or organizations you actually care about. But that's not how it works in the real world, right? You work at an agency, you got to do whatever they tell you, uh, even if you have some kind of issue with whatever organization, you don't agree with them and stuff like that. There's a bit of like that and kind of reflection on like, is this like a good thing to do with my life? Is this like valuable? My kind of part of the bad parts of the world in that way, like helping these major corporations sell more of their stuff on stuff. So yeah, and I was kind of figuring out, okay, I always kind of thought I wanted to do teaching, but I never thought it was a realistic thing to actually pursue. I don't know why. I didn't think a lot because I was young. So like, you know, but I always like thought one day I'll go back and I'll teach, like even when I was undergrad, and I thought, well, why do I have to wait for that? Why can't I just do that now? Why it seems like a silly thing to do? I always enjoyed the speech comm or like the communication side that like studies people in all those classes like family communication, romantic relationships and all that kind of stuff a lot more than I liked the stuff I was kind of doing. So I went back to my advisor and I was like had a conversation with her, and I'm like, I kind of want to teach. I like this stuff, but that's all I got right now, and I kind of in this weird space right now. And we just talked for a while, and I kind of decided that I would really enjoy going to grad school because I never disliked school. I always liked learning more. I always liked being in that environment. While all the other kids were like counting the days until the graduation, like I was like, why do you guys want to leave? It's so great here. Like you can go to class, learn these new things every day. And this environment is great and stuff. Constantly being around all these different kinds of people and ideas and stuff. And I'm like, why would anyone ever want to leave this environment? Uh, so I think that was a big part of it. So I decided to kind of go to grad school there, and I got the idea in my head I want to be a professor because I didn't want to teach high schoolers because that's a whole mess. I wanted the most close thing I can get to like an adult person ish, and I wanted to keep studying when I was studying and keep learning and not stopping the education process. I didn't want to stop learning and stuff, and that's going to be the best way to do that. That's the sort of medium, not so long, not so short version of it, I suppose.
So, when you went on to study those communication facets at a higher level, what's your particular niche or interest, or like what particularly fascinates you at that level of learning?
Early days, it was a lot of stuff with like romantic relationships, specifically like I thought the initial like initiation part of things. So like when you're, just starting to talk to someone, like what does that look like? What are the weird social rules we have around that? Specifically when it comes to like online communication, like with like I know early like when I was in my master's, I was really interested with like Tinder because at the time that was just coming on the scene, right? A lot of the dating apps were just kind of coming on the scene with Tinder and Grinder and Bumble and all these. I thought it was really interesting, like kind of changing the whole dynamic of dating in a way, right? Whereas before, you kind of like had to wait a long time before you could meet someone. The social dynamics and rules of like going up to someone in the middle of the like out of the blue, kind of, or having to know them through a friend or something. It kind of it lowered your chances. Like you only had maybe a few opportunities tops a week or 2 weeks or even a month to meet someone new and had the potential. Whereas like all of a sudden, all these apps come out and now you have hundreds of people you can like potentially connect with in a matter of like in a couple hours or something theoretically you know so I thought that was super fascinating, right? And like what are the new rules here, like what now this is kind of changing everything, right? So I was doing kind of some studying stuff with that, and then after a while I don't know, if you change, you start thinking, okay, well, is there a more important thing I could be doing? I got less interested in that, and now I became a little bit, now my stuff is a bit more like interested in when I kind of got I got my PhD stuff. When I got into that, I kind of reassessed what I was interested in, and I focused more on what are some major issues like going on in the world that I could that it seemed like a bigger deal or affecting more people, in a more like negative way that could maybe help in some way. At the same time, there was a lot of stuff going on with like Me Too and like I think the Brett Kavanaugh hearings were happening at that time. I had just started dating someone who was a victim of sexual violence. So like I'm like, okay, well maybe I want to learn more about sexual violence. It was like one of those things that like I just over the past few years I was like kind of an awakening, like like I didn't realize how big of an issue it was, which is like uh because I'm a man, like I don't.
Mhm.
It's something that disproportionately affects women. It affects men obviously too. But it's not talked about as much obviously within those groups. But yeah, like I mean, I thought, okay, this is something I should. This is some real maybe change I can get into, right? And trying to figure out my space and where I could help, or research in a way that I can relate to in some way. And basically, that led me to looking at like masculinity, how people construct that, because that actually is a huge impact on that issue. And then I kind of started getting to that. So right now, I basically study like masculinity and how people we how those ideas get perpetuated in our everyday discourse. Basically, it's a simple way to put it. But
Top insights that you've had just in your recent writing. I'm sure if you're still in that phase, you're still writing through it, working through it, but maybe share a few top insights with us.
top insights, like
Any
just
any
from like
applications of that? Like what you're thinking through? In the
applications, like kind of.
workplace. In the workplace.
Okay. Like, I mean, just like, getting at how to, my own little ways of solving those things, I guess. Uh, Man, that's a difficult thing because it's such a complicated like issue, and it's so much when you do research. It's like it. Sometimes it's like when you come to understand something, you're like, okay, well, I understand this sort of, but coming up with
Or this
solutions is
very
so hard.
tiny yeah, or this very tiny part, and I feel like if I have to come up with a solution, like, the solution has to be, like, this whole thing, right? But, like, my
Yeah.
PhD is about this little tiny piece.
Well, okay, maybe one way I can, so like right now my dissertation focuses on like fraternity men, right? And fraternities, because like historically speaking, that tends to be one of those groups. So it's a huge like problem, and that kind of stuff. So I mean, I think with them, well, first off, I wanted to get a good understanding for like how that group is kind of what the perception is around them, right? Which, not very good, right? Bad track record and stuff like that. I was formerly in a fraternity too, so that's another reason I was interested in that. And I kind of witnessed some of kind of the everyday, ways in which they like, talk about women, or they talk about like this, how like these ideas of what it means to be a man are kind of circulated and perpetuated through just everyday conversation, right? So I think I guess one of the things I want to like, I guess, like I want to work on, or that I think I can maybe help, is working closer with those groups and getting to the core of what it is into like, because it's going to change obviously from university to university, what,
Mhm.
fraternity is saying. But kind of
Even
getting a
chapter to
sense.
chapter, I would bet,
No, exactly, right? So I guess my like I guess approach or thing what I would like to eventually do is kind of work with those groups more directly and get a sense for, okay, like how is their individual version of what it means to be masculine, how is that, like what is that in that individual group, how is it getting circulated again and again, how can we sort of break that down and show that like it's this sort of constructed, invented kind of thing that they don't have to necessarily follow to like be defined as a man, or be masculine, or be accepted within that group. And and through that, maybe some of the issues that we associate with fraternities, with the binge drinking, the violent behavior, whether it be physically, sexually, or whatever it might be, will go down, or at the very least it'll be less accepted when it does happen, less ignored or like permissed in stuff like that and excused when it happens with their, friends and people in the organization.
More awareness, less bystander effect, sort of
Yeah,
second
exactly.
level repercussions.
Exactly, right.
Excellent. So how'd you end up at Northwest? So you're St. Louis area, going to school in Illinois. How did you end up in Maryville?
I applied to a lot of jobs.
Okay.
But so I applied to a lot of different places, and I think it was around like, I think towards the end of March going into April. And I went to a conference, CSCA, which actually was in St. Louis. But I went in with a friend from Ohio. So I came from Kent State in Ohio and stuff. And we decided to go to this conference. Another person in our program, got us on some panels and things like that. And we were there, and it was like literally the last day of the conference. And I was kind of, I did some schmoozing and all that kind of good stuff, trying to put my bugs in people's ears to like, hey, you should hire me. Uh, but anyway, I was just coming out of the bathroom, and the one person in my program that I knew was just talking to Joy Daggs, who's in our program, Dr. Daggs, and just I guess they knew each other. I forget the connection, but they knew each other in some way. And he just mentioned that I was on the market, and we just kind of started talking. He's like, yeah, we're looking for someone right now at Northwest, so like you should apply. And I'm like, that sounds great. And she was just talking about the job, and that sounded right up my alley, and just I didn't think much of it because like it's you learn to not get your hopes up too much when you're looking for jobs because you get a lot of rejection. So anyway, but yeah, like I went back and I got an email from her like pretty soon after. Like it was like the same week I think I met her. She reached out. I was like, yeah, we have a job call coming out. Like I'll tell you exactly when it's coming out. You should apply. And like really excited for some reason. And in my head, I'm like, I don't know why I'm so special, but I don't know. Left some kind of good impression with her, I suppose. And yeah, and then I applied for it, and I immediately got like some kind of once again email again, like trying to set up time for Zoom interview, and we kind of hit it off. It was just people were just super friendly and inviting, and it was a little less intimidating than I was used to. I'd done a few other interviews. It was a bit more formal and intimidating and a bit more, I get the sense there was more teaching focused here, which I liked a lot, and like the people I was talking to. And eventually, they sent me a message to come up and do a visit, which was super anxiety inducing. And once again, I thought it was gonna be this big formal thing. My advisor told me all this stuff that was going to be super formal. I got here, and it like oddly kind of felt like I already had the job. It was like he was just like I got picked up by Matt Walker, the head of our department and stuff, and like he was just like I think the first thing he said was like relax. Like I was just exuding, I guess, like stress and anxiety, as you'd imagine, because it's like this is like my like future in life. And I really wanted the job, so like yeah, I mean they were just so friendly and wonderful the whole time I was here, and I liked the vibe here. Like it was very student oriented, student focused, less crazy R1 which research, the publisher perish and all that good stuff, which is what I was wanting to avoid. So yeah, I mean everything just clicked well and stuff, and they gave me an offer shortly thereafter, and here I am.
So I just put about 3 concepts together there in that story because I think you've given me a good tip, and I'm going to show you how your masculine construct is actually helping me with this concept. So you
Okay.
said you went to the restroom and your friend. So basically, what I'm hearing is if you're looking for jobs, you need to have a job wingman because you were just doing your thing and your job wingman was like, hey, my buddy's on the market, right? So
Yeah.
again, masculine construct, maybe women aren't flying around like this, but
Yeah.
useful tool in knowing like, hey, I'm looking for a job. It's going to be difficult. I'm going to have rejection. I need an assistant over here who's like, feed me all the love, who's like, hey, so and so is available, right? So, and that kind of ties in with the dating app thing too, right?
Yeah.
Because before you had to have like you're gonna go to a bar, go to wherever, gotta have this person who's like selling you, right? But Tinder sells you, right? I mean, you put
Yeah.
yourself on Tinder and then you sell yourself, I guess. So I'm thinking through all these concepts. Travis, we may not need to schedule Friday afternoon podcasts anymore
Right.
because weird things come out for me from Friday afternoon podcasts. But anyway, just thinking through that, like, I mean, we help students too, but I don't students and community members and other people, but I think knowing, and you say wingman, like, it's if you have someone you trust and know, and you know they have your best interest at heart, you know that they're going to sell you well. And people trusting us, I mean, we have a full-time staff to student ratio of, what is it, Travis, like 1 to
2,000 to 1.
2,300.
Yeah.
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 So it's a little hard for each of us to do that individually, but super willing to try, if anybody comes in. And we do help lots of students and lots of alums and lots of staff. But if you have someone, just to anyone who might be listening, who's looking for work and just facing that situation, I'm going to call them a wing person, right? Find
Yeah.
yourself a wing person. That's what Adam taught me today. Wing person in the job market hunt is a really, really good thing to have.
No, 100% too. And also it makes it easier to like talk about yourself because they'll kind of warm you up a little bit. It's like having like because that's what he did. It's like having like an opener, when if you're a comedian, you needed someone to
Got a
kind of
hype
get
man
the
with you.
Yeah.
exactly kind of get the crowd going, get you hyped up and stuff like that, talk you up so you don't gotta talk yourself up as much.
Yeah. And you look like the humble and, oh, thank you so much. You don't look like the arrogant person talking about yourself all the time, right?
Well, I don't talk about myself a lot. And sometimes it's okay in this setting, but like sometimes it gets too much and I get kind of uncomfortable. I'm like,
Mhm.
enough about me. What's going on with you guys? Like, I don't, so
And we hear
yeah, I
that from
don't,
students all the time when they are applying for jobs and things like
yeah.
that it's really hard for them, like in an interview, to really sell themselves to the employer. They feel like, especially Midwestern students, we've got that
Oh
whole
yeah.
Midwest nice, you don't talk about yourself that way. So it's
No,
really hard
exactly.
sometimes for students to talk about themselves, even though that's literally what you're there for in a job interview.
Not to mention self-esteem stuff.
Mhm.
If you have any kind of self-esteem or, issues with like, your image and stuff like that, it's going to be a huge step, huge issue for you. I can't even imagine that situation. I mean, I have a little of that, but like, I mean, I know people where it's like 1,000 times worse. I don't know how people
So from the communication side of things, and I mean, I guess recent experience as well. Any advice for approaching an interview, whether it's over Zoom or in person or for any type of job? Interview prep tips.
it's gonna vary for like person to person and job to job, but like I mean, a big thing. Doing your homework obviously ahead of time, knowing like the people you're gonna be interviewing. It's I say that too, but like that didn't come up as much either. So I feel like I'm saying that in like all the interviews I did have, like I had about 5 or 6, and I think I'd mentioned what they were doing a few different times, but like they're just asking about you. So like that's a good thing I think when you're applying, but in the actual interview itself, like just having all those questions prepared and expected, to have the usual, what was why is this job different than the rest? Like what stood out to you about it? Having a good response for that. I know with like the teaching stuff, it was like specific to like, what classes, like knowing what classes I had here, what kind of stuff I could teach. So which just translates to knowing what you'll offer them. Because at the end of the day, it's like, they want to know what you're going to bring to the table. It's different than the next, 100 people or whatever it might be. Uh, you know, so, doing that and kind of figuring out, okay, like where's my little, unique addition or, how can I add to this in a way that other people may not be able to? And like I mean, as much as we like to pretend that like looking the part doesn't do it, it's like dressing up a little is gonna have. I mean, I don't make my students do that in class, because I get in a this is a whole other thing. But anyway, what I'm getting at is yeah, looking nice is important. Like try to look presentable and stuff. It was nice about the Zoom interviews that you can have notes available, so I'm anticipating all their questions and stuff like that. Having someone in the industry that actually does hiring is always helpful because they can tell you like these are the questions they're going to ask and you need to have prepared responses for them. So yeah, being able to respond to those different things, that when they come to you, having anticipating their questions, And also just, I don't know, I just like tried to be nice and smile a lot and such. I don't know. I mean, that's the other thing too, is that they want to think, like that people don't talk about this as much, but it's like they want to work with someone that they like, kind of, like, so if you are, yeah, you talk about what you can do, but like having that humility, like no one likes to work with someone who thinks they're like, uh, I don't know if cursing's okay in a podcast or not, but I would
I
just
can
say
bleep.
like, like hot, like, you don't want to think work with someone who is, um, too arrogant and whatnot. So yeah, I don't know, like being down to earth, I guess is definitely a good thing. So yeah, I don't know if that was helpful, really, but
So we used to have a class where we had, so this was like pre-Zoom being popular. We had an interview platform, and students would record themselves doing basically what we're doing, Zoom interviews. And they would have a list of interview questions, and then they would answer the questions to the computer, right? And then we had to come back in and grade them. So we were watching hours of like self interviews here. And this is data, I'm telling you, from all those thousands of hours of interviews, the number of students who are like, my name is John, I want to blah blah blah. And I was like, oh my, all my feedback, like pretty much on 99%, was like, just smile, just
yeah.
smile and appear personable, and your interview will be 300% better. Like, I don't
Hmm.
even care about your answers, I don't want to look at your face.
No, exactly, right? Like just having that little, and it's just, I think I had not some, a decent amount of advantage in the fact that I had taught speech for so long, and also that I was in video performance classes and that kind of stuff when I was in undergrad. So I'm like very conscientious about like, okay, am I having enough gestures? Am my facial expressions good? Am I adding
Keep
enough
that
vocal
energy high.
variety?
Yeah.
Yeah, am I like, doing enough things with all my body, so I mean, all those things are very conscious, to me, and I'm very much hyper aware of myself in those situations. So yeah, but like, yeah, you can't just be monotone and be dead in the eyes and face. You have to move a little bit and act like a person. Like, a lot of it is just trying to, when I do speech stuff, is trying to like get them to communicate like they do with their friends, like things they do every day. Like you use gestures when you're relaxed and stuff and you're telling stories, maybe some more than others. Like you move your face, you smile, you tilt your head, you change your posture, like you do all those things normally. So like, trying to get you to not be a robot in those situations. I mean, it's not easy. Don't get me wrong. I had my issues too, but it's something you need to learn how to do. It's one of those kind of little effects that people don't think about when
And
they
I think
take the
it
speech
boils
courses.
down to, yeah, it boils down to, those are skills that you can practice, right? You,
Oh
even if
yeah.
you're the worst person of the world, if you're like this in your interviews, like you can learn how to relax, and you can learn how to be more, I don't know,
More
interview
human.
savvy, I guess. Yeah, more human. Be human in your interviews.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are actual skills that you can learn and then practice. You don't have to be bad at interviewing.
No, exactly. And there's like tons of communication. I know the big stereotype is like, oh, you're this communication person, you should be really good at like communicating or whatever. And then you should be this really personable, outgoing, extrovert. Uh, but a lot of communication people I know are not that. They're like very much introverted, and they kind of learn the skills to pretend when they need to. But that's
Short
what we're all kind
bursts.
of doing, right?
Yeah.
you know?
Short bursts, not
Yeah.
Ask
all the
Travis about
time,
that
just
one.
when you're on. Yes, I was a broadcasting major and I'm about as big as an introvert as you can be, but you
No,
do
exactly.
small little performances, little vignettes, little pieces, and
Yeah.
that's when you're on. And then when you're off, you are off. Like
Yeah. No,
you
you
have to
go
learn to
home,
do
you shut the blinds, and be
it. Yep,
alone, and don't talk or
absolutely.
say anything to anyone. Yeah.
Yep.
like that's your little social break. But yeah, you got to be on when you're on. Yeah, you got to be learn how to do that stuff, even if it's not natural or comfortable.
So I have a question. So you teach that entry like foundations of comms. So is that basically speech class? I'm guessing that's the
It's a split.
okay.
So like every university is different how they do it, but yeah, here they kind of have like a little half of it is speech oriented, and the other half is like here's the discipline, here are all the different things we study in communication,
Right.
different pathways, whether it be organizational communication, interpersonal, intercultural, like romantic relationships, which is basically interpersonal, all those different things. So yeah, it's like everything kind of wrapped into one. You know, but yeah, but that is a big element of it. Yeah.
So how challenging is it to teach that to, if that's required for all freshmen or students who don't have that through like dual credit, and then so many people are deathly afraid of public speaking. There's all those studies that like that's the number
Yeah.
one thing they're afraid of before dying is speaking in public. How
Yeah.
difficult is it to get people to come out of their shells in that, if they're not the calm kid or the broadcasting student who, likes to do it? So many of them
Yeah.
don't. How do you get them to kind of get over that big fear?
Well, they just have to do it first
Okay.
off. I know it's
You
one of those
grade
like
them.
it's a very simple like there's more I'm gonna add to that, but yeah, the big thing is like you come in, it's like, well, you guys have to do this. So
Mhm.
like and I'm gonna grade you on how well you do that. So you have no choice. This is something you need to like. It's just and yeah, it's with some of them it is very with a lot of them it is like pulling teeth,
Mhm.
like especially when it comes to like at my the last place I was at Kent State, one of the requirements we had was doing an impromptu speech. So think about like, where you guys were like 18 and this the teacher just staying in the middle of class saying, "You tell us about this now, go." And so like yeah, so like you can imagine like I mean even now like if someone did that to me I'd be like so full of nerves and like I wouldn't know what to say and stuff like that, and I'd be resisting it the entire time and asking constantly when I can sit down, which is what happens a lot of times. So that kind of stuff, yeah, it's really difficult. And also they just don't have the skills once again to improvise. They don't have a lot of vocabulary. It's not the best. They don't have a lot of knowledge, so like they can't reach. There's when they reach for something, it's like not there because they haven't learned about a lot of different things yet. Um, but yeah, that's difficult. Yeah, just I mean, it's difficult, but it isn't in the sense that once we get to the actual speeches, like they put so much time, and we've forced so much time and prep to go into that. Like there's so much planning that has to go into that. Like as far as making outlines and even just a whole week is just spent just for them just to think of topics that are more creative and not just the usual suspects. And and workshopping those outlines, figuring out like the best way to which they can condense their ideas, practice those, and get a good sense of the material. So when they go in there, like not only can they do the practicing and stuff like that delivery wise as they should. Some don't always do that, obviously, and there's plenty of bad speeches that happens. It's going to happen. People are going up there and they're going to read the whole time. That's going to be a normal thing. That's going to happen. You can tell them to practice, but that they're not going to do that, and always. But I lost a train of thought. What was going to what I was going to say.
How do you get them? How do you get them to? I mean, I guess how do you get them to perform if they're really scared of speaking?
Well, okay, thank you. I just remember what I was going to say. It's actually, ironically, it's the people I find that are the most confident actually tend to do the worst, or not the worst, but they don't do as good as they think you would think they would do, right? So the people that come in, like you do the impromptu speech to get up there, like ha ha ha, and they just kind of like like sort of they're doing the gestures, they're making jokes, people are laughing, they're super bubbly. It's like okay, these people are used to being in the center of attention, they're used to kind of controlling the room. But the issue they have then is actually doing the work, like actually they think they can get by with the career. I doubt that, but
I
they
just
think
realized every speech I gave in that class was extemporaneous, and then I'd write an outline of what I said and turn it in. I didn't do that great, so let's be clear. But I did not do the work, like the work required to have a really good argument in my speech and then practice
yeah.
it so it came off polished. I just was like, what am I going to talk about? And then I just talked about it, and then I just reverse oriented that. Bad idea. Don't do that, friends.
Yeah, a little reverse engineering. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what happens. Yeah, like some people come in there and like they think, okay, my charisma can carry me 5 6 minutes. And it can really carry them about 30 seconds,
Mhm.
like in the top at the end. But as soon as they have to like get to the actual content, they're just all over the place. It's all tangents. There's no through line. The research is not there. They don't cite their sources. Because that's the thing is like yeah, like you need to have a good delivery, but without like the content, it's nothing. Like you're just riffing.
It's a
There's
hollow shell. Yes.
exactly, right?
That's why so many people have speechwriters, right? Because they can
Yeah.
perform, but they can't do the rest of it that goes with it. So
No. So the people that are best, I find, are actually the people that have the not always, but most of the time have actually the most anxiety. And because they're so anxious about it, they spend hours just writing, prepping,
Preparing.
editing, and trying to practice the performance to the point to where like it's just muscle memory. I mean, that's what I did. Like literally, I used to get so terrified and so anxious before public speaking. Anytime I had a semester where I had 3 different courses where every week I was doing some kind of version of a speech, if not one, two, or three, like in the same week, or two in the same day or something like that. So that forced me to like, work, deal with that. But I would black out during speeches. Like I wouldn't remember what I said, what I did. I would print out notes that I wouldn't look at because I still can't do that. I still don't like. I'll write myself notes. I'll write an outline, but I can't look at them during. I can't. That's my own little thing. But yeah. I mean, it's those people though. But they'll spend like I did, like those hours and hours just practicing and prepping for that to the point to where it's just kind of like autopilot.
What can I do? So I'm thinking through like, even as a professional who's, let's say you've been 20, 25, 30 years in a
Mhm.
position, as you move up, those oral presentation skills become, I think, more necessary. And it becomes quite obvious who is good at giving public speeches and who is not. But if
Yeah.
I have someone who is really nervous about it and comes off very stilted, and they've been, they're in a leadership role and they're a senior leader, um, maybe what are one or two things that they could do to improve their public speaking capacity? Skills or
Well,
drills? I don't know.
well, a lot of times it's just people just don't put in the work. Like, maybe they'll. So this is what a lot of people do. Even people in leadership positions that should take this a lot more seriously than they do, is that they'll write it or have someone help them write or do it themselves. They'll maybe learn the information a little bit, but they just don't practice. Like, I know it's a simple response, but like people just like they think they can just read through that and that's going to have the same impact as if they actually learned the information, sat in a room for like an hour 2 hours just going through it each time, making little notes, and not treating it like it's a manuscript. So that's what often will happen is they'll sit down, maybe someone else or them or a combination of both will sit down, they'll type out a speech word for word of what it should be, which isn't always I mean, it's generally not a good way to go about it. But like you can work with that if you strip that down to some notes and then improvise a little bit each time, right? Because you just want the main ideas. Like, what are the main things you want to say? Maybe there's a few times, either introduction, conclusion, or little quotes, like, I need to say it in this specific way. Maybe you memorize that in some way, right? But other than that, like, you want to know the information. And you're going to be okay with, like, forgetting to say a couple things or saying things differently each time. That's what's going to be. That's what's going to take for you to have all those eye contact, those gestures, and have a connection with the audience. But what happens every time is, like I said, they'll write the speech, they'll read through it maybe just so they don't have any like a flub or two, and they'll be like, "That's good." And they'll get up there and then they'll read the entire time. They won't look up, and they'll think that it'll have the same effect, and it doesn't. So really, it's just they don't practice. Like uh, people ask me that with wedding speeches a lot. I've been to a lot of weddings. I'm 30 now. That's when everyone gets married. I mean, I've been married recently too, so I mean, I'm also a part of that trend. But all friends would be like, give me like "Oh, you teach public speaking. What's some advice?" It's like, did you practice it all last night? It's like, no, well, I can't. I'm gonna give you a magical solution right now. You needed to practice.
yeah,
You
no
know?
practice in alcohol is not a formula for success.
Yeah, exactly. And they read off a piece of paper. They go on, or they don't, and they go on tangents and tell a bunch of stories that aren't relevant. And now we have a waiting to us the last 10 minutes that
Mhm.
could have been like 3.
Absolutely. Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us today, and so glad to have you as part of the Northwest Campus now.
Yes,
Yeah, of
thank you,
course.
Adam.
Thank you for having me.
I'm gonna
Great
go
to be here.
practice. I'm
Yes.
gonna go practice my public speaking.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I thank you guys so much. Hope you guys have a good day. Good
Yeah.
weekend.
Well, that will do it for another episode of Behind the Bearcat, and we'll talk to you next time. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to give us a thumbs up below. That helps out. Also, if you've not done so yet, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Also, we'd love to connect with you on social media. You can find Behind the Bearcat on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Plus, the audio podcast comes out on Fridays on all the major podcast platforms. Thanks again for watching Behind the Bearcat, and as always, we'll talk to you next time.